Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So accountability. Now, accountability encompasses a lot of things, and we've heard some of them today. Some of those are to do with separation of powers and to do with appointing the right people in the right roles. Are they the suitable people in those roles? Are there any conflicts of interest? All of these things all come together under the umbrella of accountability. So what I want to start with this afternoon to talk about is an Indian telco, Bharti Airtel. I'm sure many of you, or most of you, will have probably never heard of it. But in 2007, Temasek invested $3 billion of our dollars into Bharti Airtel. And then in 2016, for some reason, they sold it in its entirety to their subsidiary, Singtel, for a $2 billion loss. Now, that's a very strange thing. Why do you sell it to your own subsidiary for a $2 billion loss? Now, maybe at that time, the Prime Minister would have thought, well, hang on a minute, Temasek is supposed to be looking after our reserves and all our funds and invest in them wisely. Maybe he would have picked up the phone to talk to the head of Temasek and say, excuse me, can you justify why you're doing this? But of course we know he doesn't have to pick up the phone, he just walks around the house because the head of Temasek is his wife. Now, I don't know about you, there's plenty of men here. I've been married 20 years. If you have to go to your wife and question one of her decisions, how easy is it? How independent can you be? How can you be that divorced to have it unemotionally and rationally? Very, very difficult, right? So maybe it's not so easy to have those discussions. Now, of course, the Bharti Airtel story doesn't end there because Singtel haven't done so well with this project. And they've had some cash flow issues. In fact, the market is wondering whether they can continue to cash flow it. It's got to the point that in February, the international rating agency Moody, they re-rated the company and they re-rated it BA1. Now, what that means in layman terms is that it's got speculative elements and they're high risk of capital loss. And it's no longer an investment grade investment. So effectively, it's a junk bond if you put your money in it now. But of course, Singtel are stuck with it. They've got to keep working on it. So they announced just last week they're putting another $700 million into it. Now, of course, they're a GLC, so they're slightly separated from our reserves. However, they're not the only people who are putting money into Bharti Airtel. Who else is putting money into Bharti Airtel? GIC. GIC are going to put $1 billion almost of our money in there. And we know GIC manage our CPF, manage our reserves, manage all the commingled funds. That doesn't sound like a very responsible investment after you've seen Temasek already book a $2 billion loss, an international agency downgrade it to junk, and Singtel having to throw another $700 million in to try and keep it afloat. In that respect, do you think the Prime Minister might have picked up the phone and called the chairman of GIC and said, is this a very good investment to make? Of course, as we know, he doesn't have to pick up the phone. He doesn't even have to walk around the house. All he has to do is look into the mirror because he is also the chairman of the GIC. Now, I don't know about you, but how do you have a separate conversation inside your own head? Do you think we should do it? No, I'm not sure whether I should really do it. Are you really sure? Can you give me some facts, please? I mean, how does that work? Now, of course, obviously joking around a little bit there, maybe they are different from we are, right? You have the husband is the Prime Minister, he's also the head of one sovereign wealth, and his wife is the head of the other sovereign wealth. There may be reasons that we don't know why that is appropriate. I don't know what they are, but maybe they're out there. But then, what you've then got to say, though, is, well, okay, that's a rare case. We don't need to worry about that. But then what about SingHealth? We've had all these problems with SingHealth, haven't we? All of these data leaks. In fact, our defence minister, he came out and said, it's a matter of national defence. It's a matter of security that we've had these leaks in SingHealth. Do you think he might have got on the phone to the head of SingHealth and say, excuse me, what's going on here? There's some problems here. But of course, does he have to pick up the phone? No, he just has to walk around the house because his wife is the head of Sing Health, right? Ivy, what's going on here? What? Okay, I'll talk to you later. Yeah. And of course, if he has to do it again because we've had another leak, and I think we just had the other day another 800,000 records of blood donors go out. Eventually, he's got no choice. Okay, Ivy, look, I'm really worried about this thing. I think it might turn up in our Auditor General's report. Well, why don't you find out? Okay, so what does the Minister of Defence do? Well, he calls the Senior Minister of Defence, Heng Chi-hao, and he says to the Senior Minister of Defence, can you let me know if there's anything about my wife's ministry inside the Auditor General's report? Now, of course, as we know, he doesn't have to pick up the phone either, does he? Because his wife has just been made the Auditor General. So that conversation may go something like, I've got Heng on the phone and he wants to know whether his wife's got any problems in the Auditor General's report. I mean, seriously, we have husband and wife, husband and wife, husband and wife. And I've shared from a few others who've put these up that there's a lot more than just those three inside there. And we have siblings in there. And of course, I mean, doing business in here, you say, right, if you do business with your brother, you may end up not calling him brother. But we have brothers and sisters inside there. We have children of past, and we even have children of present. So with all of these inter-family relationships across the government, the GRCs, the stat boards, our ministries, how can we not have a potential for conflict of interest and not having true accountability? However hard they try, there's going to be something somewhere. And yet there's 3.5 million Singaporeans. Couldn't we find people from other families who are just as qualified in those roles to avoid that conflict of interest and avoid those potentials? I mean, it's almost like the entire government will turn up at the same reunion dinner every New Year. Of course, it's not quite that bad, although it's only 1 or 2 steps removed, because we have our scholars. We have our scholars and generals. They're also mixed in there. And this is where we start to look at, do we have the right people in the right roles? Now, many of you will know the story of NOL. You know, we're a trading nation. Our jewel in our crown was our shipping line, NOL. And of course, we should have something like that. Anyone who knows the shipping business knows that it's a cutthroat business. Those people who do well in that business are people who've done it from a young age. They know it inside out because it's also ever-changing. So you have to have a lot of in-depth industry knowledge, right? You have to be an entrepreneur. You have to be quick on your feet. There's a lot of things you need to know to be successful in the shipping business. Who did we put in charge of NOL? We picked one of our generals, Lim Tean, right? 5 years there. What happened? Ran it into the ground. We had to sell it off as a loss-making entity. Now, the French company that bought it over, they had the experience of doing the business in the shipping industry. They had the entrepreneurs. They had the business acumen. And within 1 year, they turned it round and they started making a profit out of it. Now, did we learn from that? Did someone go, Chatyan, you did okay in the army, made it to the top. Not so much with NOL. Let's find you a safe job somewhere in the civil service where, you know, you're not going to cause any trouble. No, they put him in charge of SPH Holdings, another one of our GLCs. Now, for those of you, if any of you look into their financial records, they're not doing so well now either. Technically, they're in the black, but they're only held there, 1, by their real estate investments, and 2, by all their new businesses in aged care. Just like SPH, aren't you a publishing company? Isn't that your core business? Why are you in aged care? But we actually see this quite a lot. Our GLCs will often dabble in safe local businesses to support what they can't do in their core business because they can't do it properly because they don't have the requisite knowledge. And if they ever try and do it overseas, well, that's a gone case before they even start, right? And then we get to SMRT. So, of course, we started off, we had a lady who was a businesswoman running it, but, of course, it was a public transport and train system, and her background was retail. But, okay. But then what happened? Our MRT system started to resemble a series of shopping malls that just happened to have some trains running between them. And it started to have all sorts of problems, so we had to replace her. Who did we replace her with? Someone who's got public transport experience? Someone who knows something about trains? No, we picked another general, exactly. And what happened with that general, we know, another 5 years. Unfortunately, things didn't get better. They may have got worse. We had some of those unfortunate accidents. Tragically, some people were killed. And so, we had to do something different. Now, it sounded for a while that they learnt their lesson because we had a worldwide search for talent. Excellent. And if any of you ever checked up, when Desmond Kwek was at his peak, if he had a peak, he was earning, through salary and bonuses, $2.31 million a year. Right? That's more than double the head of any MRT and metro system anywhere in the world. With a salary and bonuses like that, you'd have thought we could have got anyone, the head of the Japan MRT, the New York Metro, the London Underground, whoever. We could have got the best people in the world for so much money. Who did we get? We got another general. There's an author, some of you may or may not have heard of him, Robert Kiyosaki. So he's got a series of books in the Rich Dad, Poor Dad series, and he's talking about financial management and things like that. But he's got a saying that really sticks with me. And that saying is that A students work for C students and B students work for the government. Now, what he meant by that was the people who are the leaders, the entrepreneurs, the creators, the ones out there on the front edge, they're not the type with the mind to be the A students, right? They're not meticulous, detailed, and all of those sorts of things. They're working in a different way. But they're smart enough to know that they need to hire those people, those A students, to do all the detailed work with them. So they'll be the CEO, and that guy may be the COO, the CFO, this kind of stuff. They have a role to play, but it's not the guy at the front leading and whatever else. And then, of course, anyone they don't hire, well, they've got to go somewhere, so the government hires them. That is the case mostwhere in the world, right? Except, of course, here, where our scholars, our A students, are trying to be the leaders, the creators, the entrepreneurs, and it's not in their DNA. They may be very, very good scholars, and I'm not saying they're bad people. In fact, if I had a major corporation, I might even hire some of them to work for me. But I wouldn't, as an investor, invest in them to run a business, but I may hire them to work inside a business. The same as when we're looking at our government and all the areas that they're involved in today. They may have a role to play, but is that role to be the leaders? Now, how did we get here? So let's dial back all the way back in time, the first generation. Your S. Rajaratnam, Othman Wok, Go Keng Swee, all the early guys, the full complement of founding fathers. Those guys were streetwise, had real knowledge. They fought real elections one-on-one against the incumbents who were the colonials at that time to take control of this country on behalf of the Singapore people. And then they worked hard, they worked long hours for low pay, and everyone saw what they were doing and worked alongside them. And they built what is Singapore today, essentially. Somewhere in the 80s, in the late 80s, a small group decided the building's done, what we need now is security and longevity. And so all of that generation that knew what they were doing and that built Singapore were slowly retired or moved aside. And one little group was left under the control of Lee Kuan Yew, and they put a wall around their part of the country, so only the people they chose could come in, and everyone else was on the outside. And they set up the system that we see the result of today with all the scholarship system and all the family members and all the other things, because they hire them for other qualities and not because they have the domain knowledge or the expertise to do it. The other thing, of course, he did at that time, and if you read some of his works, there's one, I think it's The Man and His Ideas. He talks about if you take a population, you select a population and it's well-educated and well brought up, you don't have to use the stick too much because they've been well-trained. So basically, he's like, I want the people to follow in line with what I'm doing. And we know what he used to do. You know, if anyone got out of line, out comes the stick. Or my mother-in-law used to use with my son, the ten chow. Come out, naughty Singaporean, right? Stay in line. Now, of course, we didn't like that. Certainly those people who got hit by it didn't like it. But, and this is something that I hope we can all appreciate, whether we love him or hate him, we have to respect that he got a lot of stuff done and he got things going forward. Because one of the ways he did it was he didn't just take the ten chow and whack everyone on the outside, he did the same on the inside. Because you've also got his speeches, and you can watch his online speeches, where he's talking about everything should work. Whether it's electricity, water, gas, the telephone, it just works, it has to. And if it doesn't, I want to know why. And if I'm not satisfied, and sometimes I wasn't, then the chief goes, and I have to find another chief. Right? It's easy to fire the chief. So let's come forward to today. Here was a group that built it. Here was a group that put a wall around it and created the next generation, but there was still accountability. Now we have a group today. Where does the accountability sit in everything we're seeing and in what they're doing? Inside that building, of course, they've gone another step further, because now they've put the blinds up so we can't actually see what's going on properly. So the wall was built around it. Now they want to keep everything from us. So we get little bits of facts here and there. They're not using the ten chow on themselves anymore, but they're still coming out and whacking it on us. Fake news. You shouldn't share that. Facebook post. You shouldn't do that. Ten chow hit you, whack you, right? You shouldn't stand and take a photograph on the court. Stand there for 1 second. That's an illegal assembly of one for 1 second. All of these crazy things that they're doing. So they're still whacking on the outside, but they're not doing anything on the inside. So now we're thinking about suitability. We're thinking about accountability. Who, though, is ultimately accountable? Because we're seeing mistake after mistake after mistake. When is that going to be the fatal mistake? Not just another mistake, but the fatal mistake. And it could come in many means. We know that idea, that crazy idea of nuclear power, has never been taken off the table. The scholars somewhere are doing calculations. What are the risks? What are the rewards? All of this kind of stuff. Well, I think the people up the coast in Fukushima will be going, I wish my scholars had stopped, but ours are still going on. The exclusion zone around Fukushima is bigger than this island. If they make a stupid mistake, make a stupid decision and do something like that, that could be the end of Singapore. So it could be a stupid mistake they make. It could be a political mistake. We know they very much tied themselves to globalism. They very much tied themselves to Hillary Clinton and everything she believed in. Globalism around the world is being rejected. Hillary Clinton lost. And when we were doing all of that, we really pissed off China, who are a part of what's the next generation, and Russia, and all of those countries in the Belt and the Road and the BRICS. So maybe their mistake would be a political one. They've bet on the wrong horse. And of course, when we talk about betting on the wrong horse, that takes us all the way back to what I started with Bharti Airtel and putting money after a bad bet and after a bad bet. Now, in the last financial crisis, back in 2008, we know some of our funds lost up to 40% of their value. That's a hell of a lot of money to lose. There's going to be another financial reset very soon, probably after the 2020 elections. They're all frantically working behind the scenes to keep it going. But monetary systems always change every so often. Ours is way overdue. We've got a geopolitical change, financial change. Maybe we have the wrong bets. And when that change happens, where do we go? So one day, we all wake up and the house that was built by the first generation is now laying in big ruins. Who is responsible? Now, we could say they're responsible because they did it. But we could only say that if we didn't know what they're doing. But now, who here and watching online can put their hand on their heart and say nothing is wrong? That we don't have some problems. There isn't something that we have to address. Now, next weekend, 23rd of March, is the 4th anniversary of Lee Kuan Yew's passing. One of the things he said, and I think this one we all know, is if there's something wrong, he will get up and fix it. Right? We may need it, but do you think he's going to get up next week and take out the tin chow and fire some of the chiefs and start getting it all back in order? I don't think so. So he can't hold them accountable. They're not holding themselves accountable. That leaves us. We have to hold them accountable. Right? We have to say, our building is on fire, we've got to come and put this fire out. Right? Not just the people sitting here and watching now, but all your friends and relatives. You've got to talk to all of them about this, because this is very serious, because we don't know when that fatal mistake may happen. Now, what I want to leave you with is something that I shared online this week. I shared an article on the quality of leadership. And one bright spark came up and said, well, what about the quality of the opposition? Okay, fair point. First of all, if your house is on fire and the fire brigade turns up, do you put a table out the front and start interviewing them? Are you a good fireman? Have you learnt this? Or do you get them through the door and put the fire out? Right? So we've got to see what the problems are that we have to focus on. First of all, we've got to put out this damn fire, right? Now, of course, yes, we do need to also have the right people coming in. So this is where I'm also going to put an appeal out to you. As I said earlier, 3.5 million Singaporeans. Parliament has 89 seats. Somewhere in those 3.5 million, do you think we could find 89 people with the qualities we need to put it right? Now, of course, myself and Tian and some of the other alternative parties are already up here putting our hat in the ring. It may not even be us as the ones that's going to do it. We don't know, right? What we do know is we're all on the same team. It's Team Singapore, and we need to get it fixed. So for all of you out there who are worrying about the quality of the alternatives, please come and talk to us. Come and join us. Let's all work together to find the best 89 people and hold this current government accountable and put our country right. Thank you very much.